Dear WISTA members and friends, we are super excited to welcome you all to today's panel discussion, The Journey to Renewable Energy, Where We Are and Where We're Going. A very warm welcome and special thanks to our distinguished panelists, Minister Natasa Pilidou, Mr. Simeon Kassinis, Mr. Alexandros Iosifidis, and Mrs. Anna Vitalis. And of course, to our moderator, Mrs. Cleopatra Kittis. For those of you who don't know her, Cleopatra is a founder of the Mediterranean Growth Initiative and has an international career in global affairs, having worked across Europe, Middle East, and Africa, the US, and the UK. While in her consulting career, she has led governance, regulatory, and geoeconomic assignments for the energy sector, which makes her a perfect choice for this event. Don't you agree? Cleopatra, over to you. You'll be introducing your panelists and looking forward to an exciting panel discussion. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Anna, and thank you, WISTA, for allowing me to share and coordinate this panel for everybody today. And a warm welcome to our attendees. Energy and shipping go hand in hand. Ships and vessels carry energy-relevant commodities. Ships and vessels cross seas and oceans. That has an impact on the environment. The EU Green Deal is reshaping and reorientating Europe's economic model, addressing the impact of climate change and the digitalization of our economies. The Green Deal reshapes geoeconomic energy dependencies and interests as it decouples Europe from fossil fuels and touches on renewable energy sources such as hydrogen, solar and wind technologies. It has set ambitious targets: 50% reduction in gas emissions by 2030, less than 10 years from now, and net zero emissions by 2050. At the same time, a global coalition of countries has signed a treaty, the Paris Agreement, that aims to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius. The International Maritime Organization has set an ambitious agenda for the shipping sector, mandatory measures that tackle climate change, with 3 key regulatory platforms: the Pollution Prevention Treaty, an energy efficiency design index which is mandatory for new ships, and the Ship Energy Efficiency Management Plan, benchmarking progress and performance of ships towards climate change goals. Evidently, all these regulatory frameworks impact the shipping sector. We have an esteemed panel with us today to discuss the journey to renewable energy, where we are and where we are going. So our panelists will help us understand how this impacts Cyprus's domestic market, but also how Cyprus is impacted as one of the largest hubs of doing business in the shipping sector. Before I introduce the panel, let me just say that we have an hour together. We will first hear from our experts, and then for about 40 minutes. And then we'll invite, and please feel free to type your questions in the question box and the chat box. I will be fielding those to each panelist. Now, allow me to introduce the panel. Ms. Natasa Pilidou, the Minister for Energy, Commerce and Industry, and Cyprus's first Deputy Minister for Shipping. Dr. Simeon Kassianidis, Chairman of the Board and CEO of Hyperion Systems Engineering Group, and Chairman of the Board of Directors of Cyprus's Natural Gas Public Company, DEFA. Ms. Anna Vitalis, Commercial Manager at Intergas, but a well-versed expert in commercial shipping and vessels, and a member of WISTA. Mr. Alexandros Iosifidis, Deputy Director General, Marine Manager of the Cyprus Shipping Chamber, and very well versed in regulatory affairs for the sector. I welcome everybody. If I may start with you, Minister Pilidou. The EU, as we said, has set ambitious goals for climate change and meeting its Green Deal. Can you just very succinctly describe to us how Cyprus aims to meet these very ambitious targets.
Thank you, Cleopatra. First of all, allow me to say how happy I am to be part of this webinar and to see all my new and old friends. It's really lovely, and wishing all the best to all of you, and so happy to see you. And thank you for organizing a webinar on energy, which does have a lot to do with, it has a lot to do with every single aspect of our lives, but shipping is definitely very much affected by the Green Deal. So it will be interesting to follow the discussion and hear from the experts from the shipping side, since I've left shipping for almost a year now. It will be interesting to get an update on what's going on from Alex and the team. So from a sort of wider perspective, you know, it's clear to see that the green agenda is everywhere. It's what we talk about when we speak to the EU, even on other topics. So, you know, as Ministry of Commerce or Ministry of Industry or Ministry of Consumer Protection, we start a discussion and it sort of loops back to energy and how to become more sustainable generally. So there's no escaping it, and that's a good thing, right? Because we need to move to a more sustainable world, and we need to do it fast. So we have studies in Cyprus, for example, by the International Renewables Agency, IRENA, which show that we could reach between 25 and 40% total electricity supply through renewables by 2030. So we can achieve a lot if we put our minds to it, but there is a lot that we need to do. You mentioned, Cleopatra, the 55%. That's the revised goal that's gone up from 40%, which was quite significantly lower. We're still waiting to hear from the EU on our specific goal for Cyprus, which used to be 24% for 2030. We expect that it will be raised to something higher, obviously, and we will need to then allocate across all the different sectors of energy, transport, you know, electricity production, renewables, etc., how the overall target will be met. So we still have a lot of work to do, even in mapping what's going to happen. But at the same time, we need to be implementing change, because we can't afford to wait for the target to design what we're going to do. So we're already implementing a load of different projects from every perspective, whether it's legislative or practical, funding programs or different projects. And I'll try to say a few words about the most important ones, because I don't want to take up a lot of time, but just very much in summary, there are quite a few key things that need to happen in Cyprus for us to move to the new era of green energy. One is the legislative part, and that's the new draft bills that we have in either in Parliament or at legal services, basically progressing through the backlog and work that needed to be done at the Ministry of Energy now to other parts of the system. So two very important ones are electricity regulation and renewables legislation, both of which basically include a one-stop shop sort of licensing process, and that's going to be really key to making things quicker in terms of the permitting process. We're also in the process of doing a strategic environmental impact assessment study, which basically is like the spatial planning that you guys are doing for maritime. It's spatial planning for where to place PVs, photovoltaic parks, or other you know, renewables projects. And that's also very key to having a long-term sustainable strategy where we can increase the presence of such large projects without hurting the environment in other ways. And that's expected to finish in the summertime. Most important, or one of the most important things we need to do is the liberalization of the electricity market. So I mentioned the legislative part. Electricity legislation has to do with that. So it's a crucial piece of legislation that we need to pass through Parliament. a lot of apprehension, because basically, as you know, now we have a single provider of energy, or actually very recently we have 2 new entrants, because the very big change that's happened in Cyprus is that we have already entered the transitional phase for the liberalization of the electricity market as of the 1st of January of this year. So we have 2 new entrants in the electricity market, but we're not going fully liberalized until about this time next year, or actually March of next year, when we expect the software to be finished for the full liberalization, where us as consumers, everyone will be able to go on a system, look at the prices, decide which supplier they want to go with, and that's really gonna sort of bring us to a par with other European countries. So that's really key for being able to put more renewables into the system. Another important project, which I'm sure Mr. Kassianidis is going to talk about a lot more in detail than I will, is of course bringing natural gas to Cyprus, which again is something that's going to really enable us to reduce emissions, and it's also key to reducing electricity prices and giving consumers more options. So that's a project that is going ahead as planned. It's a very, very difficult project. There are a lot of different dimensions and complications, and it all needs to run basically with a very precise timeline for us to be able to bring natural gas to Cyprus by end of 2022. So I'm sure Simeon will let us know all the details, but I had the chance to visit the facility, the construction site, a couple of weeks ago, and we had a very nice meeting where we were assured that everything is going to plan. Another important project is interconnections. One of the problems that we have in Cyprus is that, aside from having a single electricity provider for many years, we also have an unstable system because we are an isolated place. We're an island, we don't have storage of energy, and so increasing renewables to a very large extent creates 2 problems. One is that we have an unstable network where we might have power cuts and difficulties, and the other one is that because we don't have storage, there's a lot of loss of investment by the different people who enter into the renewables market, because the system cannot use all the renewable energy that is produced, because it makes the system unstable at different times of the day. And then of course, because we don't have storage at night, there's a problem. So there's 2 solutions to that. One is interconnections. So the Euro-Asia, Euro-Africa interconnector, which you may have heard about, is something that we're really spending a lot of time on at the moment. We're discussing it now with the European Union because we are hoping that the project promoter, the guys who are running the project, are going to be able to get a rather large amount of money from the Connecting Europe facility, and also from banks such as the EIB or the EBRD to be able to finance this very expensive project. The reason why we need these grants is that the project is not viable in itself, because we do not want to the consumer to have to pay a load of money to be able to be interconnected. So we need to have grants to be able to make this happen, and hopefully we will. We signed an MOU with Greece and Israel, the 2 countries concerned. And storage, which I mentioned earlier, huge area of interest for us. We're discussing with the EIB, with the EU, to obtain funding. We've identified the funding gap of about 40 million where we need to subsidize large-scale projects. And we are also waiting from the regulator, from SERA, to issue the regulatory framework, because that's very, very key to us being able to proceed with the funding. We need to know how many projects we need, of what magnitude, and how they're going to work before we can actually plan the funding programs. And speaking of funding programs, that's another big area that we're working on. Fortunately, we're responsible for funding programs for entrepreneurship as well through our other hats as a ministry. So we've got about 400 million at our disposal for the years to come, 2021 to 2027. That's a huge amount compared to what we had in other previous periods. We had 120 million in the last period. And we've already issued funding programs with 65 million. I actually calculated it a minute ago in 2021. So that's huge. I was so happy when I came up with that number, and 38 million out of the 65 is purely on green projects, purely. So a lot on homes to get upgraded electricity wise, and even to install storage, which they can now do as well, but also even for charging for electric vehicles and various other possibilities for becoming energy efficient. We will of course be issuing such programs for businesses and also for municipalities and public buildings as well in a few months' time. So not wanting to take up any more time, I'll stop there and perhaps we can discuss more later. Thank you.
Well, it seems that the new era is opening up, like completely reshaping both Cyprus's economic model, but also the green agenda as a new mindset. So thank you for that. I have another question for you, which I will leave for later, Minister Pilidis. I'll move to Dr. Kasianidis and just ask to tell us a bit about the big infrastructure project on gas, natural gas, and tell us a bit about the significance of this project to the competitiveness of the Cyprus market. Minister Pilidis alluded to it, that it opens up a cheaper electricity. But how do you see its relevance to the competitiveness of the market and of course to the EU Green Deal?
Okay, thank you, Cleopatra. Thank you to Lisa, and thank you to the Minister for making such a grand opening to the subject of introducing natural gas to Cyprus. So I think what we have to start thinking about is that this is an effort that dates 10 years about. It's and the complexities of the project and the complexities of the funding, the complexities of the impact that it will have to the economy have all, let's say, in a way conspired for this delay. Fortunately, we are now in a position that having secured the funding, we have secured the project capital expenditure for the project is about 289 million. We have secured 374 million in terms of available funding. So that gives us some flexibility and ability to move and maneuver. That has come as a 101 million grant from the European Commission, similar to what now the EuroAsia is trying to achieve. We have 43 million that has come as equity participation from the Electricity Authority in the subsidiary of the FITFA, which is the one that will own the infrastructure. And then we have very good terms financing from EIB at 150 million and 80 million from EBRD. This is a transformational project for the Cyprus economy. It is a result of very good and solid cooperation by all stakeholders. I think everybody in one way or another has participated and helped. Yes, we've had some frictions or disagreements and so forth, but everything is important. And then was mentioned, and as I mentioned, we are on track to deliver, let's say, before the end of 22, to make natural gas available to Cyprus, which is according to the contract and the plan. Now, it's transformational for many reasons, because we talk about the long-term vision of reducing the cost of electricity. But in the meantime, in the interim, I should say that the project has already had a significant positive environmental impact to Cyprus. In the area, the landing site of the jetty that will be built, the project involves an FSRU, which is a conversion of an LNG carrier, which is actually has been named Etifa Prometheus. So the ship is now in the shipyard in China being converted. There's a jetty that is a 1.2 kilometers jetty that is going to go out to sea. Jetty-borne pipelines, an onshore buffer of pipelines, all the automation systems, measuring stations, and so forth. So it is a quite complicated project that covers, let's say, marine engineering, shipping, landside process engineering, pipelines, automation control. We had as an indication for impact, let's say the kickoff meeting was attended by about 80 professional experts that were all leading different teams. So this is a big step for Cyprus. And in a way, it is also proves of concept that Cyprus can undertake large energy projects. I think this is another indirect significance. But coming back to the site, we had the phosphogypsum radioactive pollution that was a remnant of the chemical industries. That already was funded by DEFA, and that land has been secured. It cost about 4 million euros, so now the area is safe. This has been going for many decades as a problem. We've addressed it, we've solved it, so already there's benefit. Now that's also an indication that there is already money from DEFA project going into the economy. So basically it creates jobs, it creates opportunities, it creates different things. Now, with the advent and the introduction of natural gas, then you have a lot of different things. And one project that we're looking now is other than, let's say, supplying the power generation, and the minister mentioned that we already have the 2 IPPs that are actively discussing with us about being supplied with natural gas in order to generate electricity. So competition between the producers will actually lead to a reduction of price. So then we have the benefits of environmental penalties of being reduced and Cyprus improving its KPIs with respect to the environment. And then let's say you have things that we are looking at right now for bunkering, so which is directly related to the shipping industry. And for us, it also creates an opportunity in the sense, of course, all of you will know a lot more than I do with respect to the shipping, but let's say the fact that suddenly Cyprus is becoming a stop for cruise liners. The cruise liners around the world have followed a pattern that they have been turning into LNG for fuel. So that by stopping into Cyprus, therefore effectively through its relationships and its ability to support LNG bunkering, can become the East Mediterranean hub for refueling of cruise ships. So that is also another significant area that can affect. Of course, we can go on and on, but we're talking about providing gas to the industry, providing, let's say, we have plans to look at putting off-grid stations to make gas available to the industrial zones. So it is indeed a stepping stone, but a very important stepping stone. It's kind of like opening the door into the new era of gas. And I think to make a comment that sometimes is being made as to why Cyprus now going into gas and it's not doing this or depending on solar or depending on renewables. And since the topic is such of the discussion, it is proven worldwide that the introduction of natural gas actually increases the penetration of renewables. This is a fact. This is not a theory, and it's not a discussion. And the reason for that is a technical reason. The gas-fired turbines can get on or off at the press of a button, oversimplifying. While you have what we have today, fuel oil, you need to have everything working and it's in a state that can increase and so forth. So you have both inefficiencies and pollution ongoing in order to be able to meet the system. And of course, you cannot switch them on and off as the sun comes up or as the high peak of wind. So you see, if you look at the energy generation profile, for example, in countries like Germany or in the UK, I mean, you have continuous peaks and troughs, let's say, and that is a direct relation to the availability of gas-fired power generation, which means that you get it as you need it. And that will be a huge benefit for Cyprus. And it will also support the renewables. And to close, how all this fits together, we have all these renewable plants, especially the photovoltaic, that are coming to us to talk about enabling them to introduce gas-fired smaller turbines, let's say, for power generation, so that they can actually become a 24-hour, 24/7 producer of electricity at a smaller scale rather than the big conventional plants, but still making it possible. So if you put all these things together, then it brings us closer to the targets that we have for meeting the Green Deal specifications and so forth. Gas for us is a significant move and a significant thing that we believe is a transformational project that is going to change the economy and a lot of other things into how we actually operate and do the business. So
well,
I think I took my 10 minutes.
Excellent. Thank you, Simeon. I hear very positive trajectory, not only building capacity and skill set in the domestic market to build, construct, and know-how for large energy projects. It will reshift and help transition to renewable energy as a bridge fuel, natural gas, and will regenerate but reconstruct the infrastructure of the domestic market in fueling industry and households with gas-powered energy. That's wonderful. I'll turn to Mrs. Vitalis, if I may, because I know she has been in the trading business, the understanding how vessels and LPG moves around various regions, pricing, but also vessels and construction of vessels and leasing of vessels. So given the focus on climate change, Ms. Vitalis, can you tell us the impact on the real business, on capital commitments ship owners need to make, but also what type of energy relevant commodities are on the rise? How is your business changing because of climate change regulation?
Thank you, Cleopatra, for the introduction. Of course, there is, as stressed before, a strong focus on climate change, and the environmental issue is part on everyone's agenda. There is a pressure for green activities and behavior from various stakeholders, institutions, NGOs, the community, but also from investors. We see the EIB transforming into a climate bank, and we see a very determined EU Commission with ambitious targets, and we then saw the Europe's Green Deal managing to survive the pandemic. There is, and there will be even more regulatory pressure in reducing emissions, but the setting is still cloudy and unclear, and this is the fact that impacts on the business, along with resource availability issues and considerable investments. From the business perspective, I would say we face different types of risks. It's financial risks, technical risks concerning the effectiveness of the measures and implementations taken, external risks such as policy and regulations, fuel prices, market trends. And as far as my industry is concerned, let's say biofuels are on the rise, and although still a controversial climate solution, they have the potential to contribute to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and the advantage to be rapidly biodegradable. A study commissioned by Liquid Gas Europe has revealed that LPG has the capacity to become 100% renewable by 2050 with bio-LPG. And LPG as other renewable gases, they can play a considerable part in the energy transition. And for example, they can play a significant role in complementing electrification and other energy solutions. LPG is a widely used alternative fuel on the market today, and the LPG fleet increases about 5% every year. Bio-LPG has exactly the same composition characteristics as fossil propane. The only difference is where it comes from, and bio-LPG comes from renewable feedstocks. And this is the reason it is considered a perfect drop-in solution. And keeping also the consumers in mind, it's important to offer to people affordable, low-carbon options. But there are many commodities on the rise, and LNG, as already mentioned by Mr. Kassianidis, again, already a large interest for its use as a marine fuel as well, and the number of ships using LNG is growing rapidly. It is favored on all types of vessels, from containers to cruise ships, but still the CO2 reduction achieved by the use of LNG is not enough to reach the 2050 objectives. We know that this is, but it is a very important transition fuel. In the horizon, there are other alternative clean fuels such as green methanol, hydrogen, nuclear energy, green ammonia. That's for ships fuel as well, and they can greatly assist in the reduction of emissions, but practically they are unlikely to become massively available in the short term due to various technical, economic, and safety challenges for the moment. Same as we have so many different options of fossil fuels, we also have many options for green fuels, and it's good to have many and keep many options for green fuels, because no one solution fits all. What is needed is policy makers to decide on the fuels that we're going to use and provide incentives for producers and for consumers to switch to cleaner fuels. Policy interventions are very essential to put forward a stable framework for these renewable gases and provide both supportive policies and subsidies. And it was also mentioned by the minister that renewables actually rely on policy and regulations, and therefore this is key. To comply with the new regulations, the shipping industry must implement fundamental changes in fuels, technologies, operations, and business practices. And the choice of the appropriate fuel is perhaps among the most important decisions that ship owners will be called upon to make in order to make the ships align with the new standards. The low sulfur fuel is only a transitional step, but the availability of alternative fuel, as mentioned earlier, is a big challenge to overcome this problem now. So for shipping, the shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy is not a viable solution yet. Solar and especially wind energy may achieve a high percentage of fuel savings, but at the moment they cannot totally replace fossil fuels and supplement existing power generating systems. We also see the electrification of ships is also an area that the marine industry is heavily investing. The power system of full electric ship is based on batteries charged from the onshore grid while the ship is at berth. But of course, this full electric operation seems to be relevant only for the short sea segment at the moment. Hydrogen is also a very favorable option to power fuel cells on board. There are still safety concerns for its use, and there are other challenges such as production and storage. So, of course, we see changes in the ship design to implement these reductions, and this mainly involve optimization of hull shape and superstructure, improvement of propulsion systems, and energy efficiency designs in general. The optimization of the hull shape and superstructure can have an impact in reducing fuel consumption and CO2 emissions. Large kites is a promising solution to increase the propulsion efficiency in navigation, especially in the high seas. All of these require capital investment. And with this unclear landscape of what the ship of the future will look like, along with the pandemic, have impacted on the ship owners' investment in new tonnage. To encourage the adoption of low carbon policies, we need incentive mechanisms. We need favorable tax systems, low interest loans and green financing. Access to capital markets, it's limited, especially to small shipping companies, and this is a big obstacle in the investment of emission reduction solutions. So we need to see subsidies for the use of cleaner fuels, encourage investments, even some small regional or local measures like port fees, discounts on vessels with certain environmental criteria. And of course, it's worth mentioning and congratulating here the initiative of the Cyprus Shipping Deputy Minister early this year to offer green incentives to reward vessels that prove to successfully reduce emissions. This is in brief from my side.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Very succinct and very informative. Lots to do. It seems it's the beginning of the journey for the shipping sector in complying with all the wishes of the regulators to look at climate change and combat its impact. So a lot to watch, and maybe we should keep a ongoing briefing on the greening of the sector. So thank you, Anna. And last but by no means least, Alexandros Josefidis with the difficult task to tell us how do you see, Mr. Josefidis, if you were to select all these regulatory imperatives that the policymakers and the politicians are setting on the sector, what urgency, which of these are urgent? If you were to tell the sector, the ship owners and everybody who works in the sector, if you were to identify or put priority, which ones would be the most urgent ones? What should we be looking at?
Thank you, Mrs. Geti, and thank you to Vista for inviting me to this lovely panel. To a large extent, I think an owner-operator has already said what is needed. Anna Vitalis has already spelled out what I will expand on as well. But before I go forward, I just wanted to remind you that today we are not celebrating, but commemorating a very sad anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic. So I don't know whether the date was chosen specifically for this purpose. And just to take on from there and to take on from where Anna has left, and as you said now, Mrs. Gittis, we are now looking at the fourth propulsion revolution. We have gone in shipping from wind to coal to oil fuel ships, and now we need to see to decarbonize shipping. And to achieve this and the stringent greenhouse gas reduction targets that were set by the IMO in order to achieve the vision of the Paris Agreement, the challenge is enormous. An entirely new generation of fuels and propulsion systems will need to be developed. However, many of the potential zero carbon fuels, such as ammonia and hydrogen, which are currently at the forefront of development, present serious operational challenges for the shipping industry. In addition to the safety issues that they will need to be addressed, they also have low energy density, meaning that ships will have to carry much more fuel, and the global shipping fleet will need to be modernized and new fuel supply networks developed. So it's not just a question of developing the fuels, it's a question of a whole package of having the infrastructure to supply the ships with the new fuels, and of course, to have the ships built to accommodate the new fuels. So What is urgent? What is urgent? We as an industry have recognized that from the very beginning. If we are going to go to the vision and achieve the vision of the Paris Agreement, indeed, we need research and development. We are going to need new fuels. The current fuels are not going to lead us to achieving this goal. But having said that, the industry and the IMO has worked on some immediate measures that will help to start the path towards that goal. However, again, with a lot of concern and a lot of obstacles and a lot of requirements for the ships themselves. We would always say that the same way that you buy a car and you get your fuel at the pump and the fuel supplier is responsible for giving you the proper fuel, it should be the same for shipping. But unfortunately, shipping has to do it by themselves. We have to do it by ourselves. Going back then, the industry recognized early on that zero carbon technologies can only be introduced if there is a huge increase in global research and development spending. And to catalyze this, the industry itself proposed the creation of a $5 billion research and development fund aimed at identifying one or more technical pathways that can lead to the introduction of zero carbon fuels across the sector by 2030 and beyond. These $5 billion US dollars will be collected through a bunker levy of $2 per ton of fuel consumed on board for at least the next 10 years. And this fund is currently under discussion at the IMO. So we have seen what will be required and we have made our proposals to the IMO, and we are ready to finance part of this research and development. Not in contradiction, but in along with what Mr. Kassianidis said and what Anna said, the use of existing fuels as the LNG, LPG, and methanol can only be an intermediate solution for the medium term until 2030. Beyond that, we need the new fuels, we need the infrastructure. So IMO, immediately after the announcement of the Paris Agreement and being called to regulate the shipping industry to achieve the goals of the Paris Vision, set up its own roadmap in 2016 on how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from ships and to start moving towards the path of achieving the decarbonization of our industry by the end of this, as soon as possible and before the end of this century. So in 2018, the IMO adopted an initial strategy for the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from ships, which calls for short-term measures, meaning measures that will have to be agreed and have been agreed and have to be implemented by 2023. There will be discussion on medium-term measures, 23 to 2030, and there will be discussion on long-term measures. Part of these short-term measures that have been agreed, and of course you've already mentioned what the strategy of the IMO calls for, and definitely calls for immediate by 2030 efficiency improvement of all the ships by at least 40% compared to 2008 levels. And the long-term goal at this moment is to reduce the absolute emissions from shipping by 50% compared to the 2008 goal. Now, I'm not going to go into the short-term measures at this moment, which have been agreed, and they are going to be the immediate concern of owners and operators. And to say that Europe in itself with the Green Deal, and just to link in the Green Deal here, Mrs. Gitti, is definitely it has its own agenda for Europe, but regulating regionally is not something that is helping our industry and global industry to move forward and achieve its long-term decarbonization targets. It only adds to the burden of the industry. It only complicates things, and I'm not sure to what extent it will achieve the goal of helping the industry, the shipping industry, to reach its final goal. We as an industry always say that Europe has done so far and should continue to work within the framework of global regulation. We need the global regulation. We need the global targets in order for the ship owners to be able to make decisions and to be able to operate their ships in a sustainable and viable way, because we don't build ships for a lifetime of 5 or 10 years, we build ships for a lifetime of 20 years. And if the goalpost keeps moving, that doesn't make life easy at all for the shipping industry. And having said that, two initiatives that are coming out of the EU that we are aware of, but still not clear of what shape they will take, is the intent of the European Commission and the European Parliament to bring shipping within the European Union's ETS system, which, as it functions right now, it's totally not suited to the shipping industry, and it will bring about a total, I would say, administrative and cost-wise disaster for the small and medium enterprises and shipping companies, which form the backbone of the European ship owning and shipping industry. And unless they decide to go, and if they decide to go ahead with this proposal, as Anna said, the money collected from the shipping industry should be used not only to finance whatever needs of Europe within the Green Deal, but also to return it back to the industry for research and development, and of course to fund the industry to be able to switch to alternative low carbon fuels, which are going to be the much more expensive option in the near future as compared to the traditional fuels. And furthermore, the other proposal that is in the works right now, and it is creating concern for the industry, is the Fuel EU maritime proposal, which aims to force ships to use lower carbon intensity fuels when trading in the EU. Well, for this to happen, the industry needs to be able to have access to these fuels, and certainly it has to be on a global basis, because a ship that's coming in from the Far East or from the West or the East and not being regulated by the European domain, where are we going to get the fuel to sail into Europe and to trade in Europe? So Europe has to be a little bit careful to help our efforts in decarbonizing the industry and not to hamper our efforts. And this is my little introduction for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Giuseppidi. So evidently it's a challenging moment in getting clarity on where regulation can help create certainty both for investment and for business continuity. Yeah. But just to your point, I think Europe is, like in many other fields, like technology or competition, is trying to be the standard setter for global industry by starting from Europe. So you might, I think the shipping sector has some work to do in Brussels. That's what I hear. I don't see any questions coming in unless the organizing team can see questions coming in. But until we do, let me just revert back to all our panelists for short comments. I would like to hear your views for the young people in Cyprus, but also the global industry in shipping. If you were to advise them to focus in building skills in the shipping sector, what would those skills should be about? Should it be about the insurance side of it, the energy side of it, the ship management side of it? Can I start with Minister Pilidis? If you were to advise young people today to get into the...
I'm not expecting that question to come to me, I guess, since having left the deputy ministry. But I think, look, I mean, there's huge presence of ship management in Cyprus, but I believe that, which I believe can grow, but the effort, I think, should be in enriching and enlarging the cluster as a whole. Because if the cluster is not enlarged as a whole, then it is a lot more precarious in its presence in Cyprus, and it's very easy for different companies to decide one day that they're going to move their headquarters or their offices to one of the many locations that they have offices in, particularly in non-EU jurisdictions. And I think Alex made it clear in his intervention earlier that you know, yes, we're trying to do good things with climate change, but there's a very I'm hearing an echo. There's a very subtle balance between competitiveness and doing, you know, what we need to do. So I think you're right, that there needs to be big and detailed discussions at the level of the EU to make sure that the measures that will be introduced will be appropriate. So to answer the question about skills, I think, and I think, I think it's not anything hugely mind-blowing. Everyone in the shipping sector, I think, agrees that we need practical skills for people who will go into the shipping sector. So experience at sea, I think, is something that is hugely important. And I think what we need to convey to kids considering this career choice is that it doesn't need to be for a lifetime. It's like training to be a doctor. You need to invest in your career and spend, you know, a number of years, which can open up opportunities, huge opportunities in on land later on. So that would definitely be a career choice that I think could lead to very good remuneration, very good job opportunities in Cyprus and abroad, and certainly the lack of seafarers globally, the shortage of seafarers globally, is something that will only get worse if we don't manage to incentivize more young kids to get involved in that career. And certainly COVID hasn't helped, because there's a lot of difficulty in seafarers' lives that we see every day, and unfortunately it will be even harder to get people to choose the career because of that. But it is definitely a good option, and it opens up huge opportunity.
Oh, thanks for unmuting me, administrator team. Before I come back to this question, there is a question from the audience. Is there a plan at hand regarding the production of biofuels? And if yes, will there be any support funding to the parties that will develop the process of producing biofuels? Maybe the minister or Mr.
Yeah, I'll take the question. There is a plan, actually. This is under the Ministry of Agriculture, which I believe has developed a funding program also for the provision of government guarantees for lending facilities. And there are some companies that are already quite advanced in the planning for the production of biofuel. For us as a Ministry of Energy, we definitely want to support. You know, we're in the unfortunate position now where we are importing biofuel, even though we could be producing it. So a lot of the raw material that could be used for biofuel is exported, and then we import it back again to use it, as Anna will know, I think, very well. So so yeah, there's interest in that, and I think there's interest from the companies as well, from the fuel companies, from what I know, to actually have more availability in Cyprus, because it would bring down the cost, and that means that the consumers' costs would also come down as well. And also we are developing a funding program for circular economy, which is going to be announced probably in 2022. So within those parameters, there will also be funding available for companies that engage in activities that are circular, and you know, this could be one of them.
Great. Thank you. We have just a few minutes before the close. I will go to Mr. Josephidis just very quickly. If you were to advise young people, or even people in the industry already, if they need to reskill, where would you see reskilling or new skills needing to come in?
That's a very interesting question, Mrs. Gitis, and you're addressing a question to a father of a seafarer. So I definitely, and as Mrs. Pilidis said, and as an organization here, we have always, we have from the very beginning assessed that the human capital and the properly skilled personnel is what our industry will need in order to support its viability and, of course, its expansion. Finding locally kids of with technical background is something that we're missing at the moment, and young men and young women who have been at sea, worked on board the ship, and they have gained the experience of the seagoing profession, again, as Mrs. Pilidis says, to come back here and to really fill in those positions and those skills that will be required in the future. In fact, I would say that LNG trading and LNG skills around LNG will be something that would definitely be recommended. Again, sorry for going back to my son, he's operating on an LNG vessel, always looking at long-term employment on the FLNG that Dr. Kassianidis will probably have in place very soon. And definitely not so much on the theoretical training, on the practical training itself. And I must say here, and I have to do a little bit self-praising, since we started as an organization here promoting careers at sea and of course careers in shipping, we have seen an increased number of young Cypriots going to the maritime academies, both in Greece and here in Cyprus. We've seen the setting up of 2 maritime academies, in fact 3. One of them actually specializes in transforming graduates from theoretical studies to professional studies and becoming third engineers. So definitely on the technical engineering side, I can see some of the skills, and as we move forward, of course, IT technologies and cyber are something that needs to be looked at, because it definitely will affect our industry quite dramatically as well. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah. Dr. Kassianidis, your 2-second comment or 2 very brief comment before I close with Anna.
No, I think that I will not take on the question. We've heard from 2 people that have a lot more knowledge about the subject. But I would think that it would be interesting to note that the changes that are required of the shipping industry are so significant, and the human capital in Cyprus is at a good level. So that creates opportunities to do a lot of research and development, and develop, let's say, and invest in the development of technologies that will address these issues. And maybe Cyprus can take a role into developing and leading the effort of whether it is decarbonization, carbon dioxide absorbers on ships, or whether it is, let's say, other type of scrubbers, or a combination of, let's say, introducing biofuels or hydrogen in the mix with LNG and so forth, and all that stuff in a horizon of 10 to 20 years that we're talking about, that basically it is possible with the good academic institutions that we have and the good quality of human capital that we have, with the large shipping presence and decision making that exists around Cyprus, that can be put together in some sort of a force that can develop a technology which in that sense can lead also to attracting and developing skills and opportunities, creating opportunities for young people. So, my 2 seconds.
Great. Thank you. Anna Vitalis, a few words before we close with Anna Burgos.
Perhaps to add on Mr. Josefidis as well, I think since technology and digitalization are playing a critical role in transforming the shipping sector, and I think a gap in skills in this area is already being witnessed. We will expect to see skills in the area of digitalization, innovation, fuel efficiency, and I believe advanced skills in analytics and use of data in optimization of the fleet, for example, will be very necessary. And I think in the future we will see demand for green roles and for environmental specialists maybe, and seafarers will have to master new technologies as well, and new green technologies. And as ships will get more sophisticated, new skills are needed, and the training need to change too, adapt and provide training on the new specialized trades and on new specialized equipment. And future engineers will have to cope with new fuels of extreme volatility, which require very careful handling. So I think it's quite important to pay attention to this gap in skills to avoid big marine accidents, for example, which we all know that most of the time are due to human error. So I think, yeah, there is a new skill set necessary for the new young professionals entering the sector.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. Just to summarize, the title of today's webinar was The Journey to Renewable Energy. Where we are, it seems we are at the very beginning with a lot of, there's still room for creating clarity, both on regulation that will allow investment, that will promote research and development, that encourages new skills. So that's the optimistic side of it, even though it creates tension for business planning and business investment. So where we are going, we're going towards a very green, climate-friendly agenda, business environment, conscious reputation for the industry is at stake in making it green. So lots of good work ahead. I thank Vista for the opportunity to moderate this panel. I thank our panelists for their time and wisdom. And back to you, Ana Burgos, for closing the webinar.
Anna, you're muted. Anna, you're muted.
Sorry, guys. I was never known for my technical skills, for my technology skills. Again, thank you, Cleopatra, for moderating this, and thank you, Natasha, Alex, Simeon, and Anna. I'm dropping the surnames and the formalities as we end because you know we are a nice group of friends here in two niche industries. You know, as you were talking, and I was getting really excited, and I was already making plans about the next career fair that we are organizing. I don't think it should be career only, Alex. I think we should now continue calling it marine and energy. I can see it all combined. 5 years ago, I chose shipping over engineering. I'm a bit too old now to go back to chemical engineering, so hopefully we can do something to encourage the younger people to combine both, to see the new skills, to see the future, because I think, well, at least I find it as the most exciting industry in Cyprus anyway. So thank you all. Thank you to the audience for joining us and attending, and I think maybe we could have a sequel.
Absolutely.
Hands up. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vista.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lovely to see everyone. I hope to see you in person soon as well. Best wishes.
Let's hope for so.
Bye-bye.